Echo what Tommy said a moment ago. We had a great meeting with all of our staff that are what we would call Hammond campus specific about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And one of the things that came up was how much appreciation that we have for all of our Sunday morning volunteers that help us execute not just nursery, but children, what we're doing in middle school ministry, and then what happens in a variety of other ways, deaf ministry, Spanish outreach, classic service, and then the host of people that are involved in hospitality and security, all the things that happen. And they talked about the fact that we rarely ever get together. So we decided to try this, and we do it with a little bit of apprehension because our children's workers are so incredibly gifted, and our student workers at communicating at the level that a child needs it and can benefit from it, that we don't want to be disruptive to that. And obviously, if you know anything about me, my vocabulary is probably not well suited for 5-year-olds, right? And I try. I have grandchildren. It's not that I can't relate to them. It's just that mostly it's about money, right? I can't probably do that in mass. So we're gonna focus today. We really tried to prepare this way. This is a family sermon, so it'll help the family. I think it'll help you with your children. I think potentially it could help your whole entire family, maybe even the trajectory of your life. Because it's such a busy morning, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time. I want to get right into it. Genesis 27, and I'm going to read this text and weave it around telling you the background and setting the story. The chapter begins in Genesis 27. We're going to talk about brokenness and blessing today. How do you deal with the brokenness of the inevitable, real brokenness that is part of being a human and is part of every human family? How do you get the blessing that helps you get past that brokenness? So the chapter begins with Isaac, his wife Rebekah, his 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. And Isaac has gotten old. He's described as literally being near the end of his life, and his eyesight had gone bad. That was a sign of old age. And he realizes he doesn't have a lot of time left. And so he calls for his favorite son, which is Esau. And that's part of the complexity of the problem. And his point is going to be to bless him, all right? Genesis 27, look at verse 4. This is what that text says. And he said, and make some savory meat. Now, we're in the South. That just literally means barbecue. I mean, this is going to get deep today, right? Such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now, when he says his soul, now he's not talking about some I'm wishing favor and fortune on you. He is going to convey something of significance, of life-shaping significance to his son. And by the way, that's what parenting is. You are shaping the life of your children by the way that you parent, the way and the words that you speak. And so this is not just a deal between Isaac and Esau. The whole family knows about it. Rebekah overhears, and she has a plan. And she has legitimate reasons for her own plan. It's a plan that she has had all the way back in Genesis 25. And she believes to the core of her being that blessing actually belongs to Jacob, not to Esau. And again, that's complex and maybe in some way will help to sort that out in your mind. And so she moves quickly and she instructs Jacob, the younger son, to go and get the goats. And she said, I'm going to cook the food, and then I am going to let you put on your brother's clothes. I'm going to let you dress up like Esau. And Jacob's hesitant, as you can imagine, right? This could not go well. If I get found out, this is not going to go well. He goes, this potentially could ruin my life, right? This could be life-defining in a bad way. It could be life-defining in a good way. And verse number 13, this is important. And his mother said unto him, upon me, by thy curse, my son, my only son, only obey my voice and go and fetch them. Now here's what she's saying. If this goes bad, if this doesn't work out, the curse doesn't go on you, the curse goes on me. So Jacob does what his mother tells him to do. And he goes in and he carefully prepares or takes this prepared meal and he walks in, and this begins an exchange of questions and answers. And Isaac said, who are you, my son? And Jacob says, without any hesitation, I am Esau, your firstborn. Now, that's a lie, right? And he says it probably not in the most convincing way. His emphasis is, I am your firstborn. I'm the one that deserves the blessing of the firstborn. So his father reaches out, he feels for him, and because he's been dressed up in Esau's clothes, he feels the goat skin on his hands. Esau is hairy. And then he comes near and asks for him to kiss him, and he smells the clothes, and then he speaks. Look at verse 27. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment and blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore, God, give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of the corn and the wine. Let people serve thee. Let the nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curse thee, and blessed be everyone that blesses thee. So he's blessed. He gets the blessing. Well, it's not the end of the story. And they knew, Rebekah and Jacob knew it wouldn't be the end of the story, because Esau was always going to come home, right? They were always going to have to deal with the aftermath. And Esau returns, and he walks in with the food, and he has this expectation that what just happened has not happened, that it's actually going to happen to him. And in an instant, this realization breaks into Isaac's life. And look at verse 33. Isaac trembled very exceedingly and said, who? Where is he that taketh the venison and brought it to me? And I have eaten of all before thou came and have blessed him. And then if you could just trust me for a moment. He says, and yea, he shall be blessed. Literally, indeed, he will be blessed. He will be blessed indeed. In other words, I can't take it back. And I can't take it back even if I want to, because what I did was not what I wanted to do. It's what God willed to be done. And when Isaac heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry. And he said unto his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Even bless me also. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Now, very complex. This could be a series of sermons, no doubt. There's a hunger that sits at the bottom of every human heart and every human soul. And most people, maybe without even recognizing it or being able to name what that hunger is, they spend their entire lives trying to feed it. For you that have discovered it and worked it out, it's an incredibly freeing thing. And for you that have not, perhaps today you'll find that freedom that only the blessing of God can give you. It's hard to define. In fact, we have flattened our understanding of the word blessing in a way that this makes it difficult. Let me see if I can describe it to you. That blessing, that need for blessing is what sits in a child's heart who is just caught up with the need to perform. So he's always on his best behavior. He's always trying to do his best in school. He's always trying to do his best in sports, right? He's trying to to live up to. He's trying to perform in a way because he believes that the blessing is earned. It's not just freely given. You see it in middle-aged adults, right? Who they never quite find themselves. I'm always amazed at how many people are in this stage and season of life. They live lost. There's just this ambiguity about meaning and purpose and reality of life. And they're trying to prove something, usually to a parent, probably to a father. And they may even be doing it even though the father is entirely gone out of their life completely. Or you see it in a person that is so driven in life. They don't even really know what they're after. They're just so driven because they're never satisfied. They're never at peace, and they never have rest. What these people are hungry for, what sits at the bottom of the human soul, is this need for blessing. Not what culture defines as material success. It's actually something weightier than that. It's what gets at the question of identity. Who am I? Of acceptance. Do I belong? About future. Is there a future for me? When Isaac chooses to bless his son and calls him to receive this blessing, what he's doing is he's passing on a covenant. He's saying, in effect, everything that God has promised, the land, the descendants, the blessings that will reach every nation on the earth, I'm placing on you. What is actually incredible when you think about this is that this promise, which is recharting, it's resetting the whole course of human history through the family of God that is going to carry the covenant promise of God that is going to end up at the birth of Jesus some thousands of years, centuries later. And that blessing and promise is given to a family that is so broken and so dysfunctional. I mean, you think you come from a broken family, or you think you come from you've seen nothing, right? You have a father who plays favorites. You have a mother who's manipulating a conspiracy. You have a son that does not value what he has or who he is, and another son so insecure that he has to pretend to be somebody else to have acceptance by his father. You need to see past this dysfunction and see that there actually is a blessing that is so powerful that human brokenness cannot stop it. That's the good news. The brokenness that you have come from is no match for the blessing that God wants to give you. All right, so let's work through this idea of blessing in a succinct way, and I want you to anchor into this. The blessing that you get from God is not something that you earn, you receive it. You receive the blessing even though you don't deserve it. You receive the undeserved blessing of God. Now let's talk about this quickly. First of all, the nature of blessing. Now Isaac announces that he's gonna bless Esau before he dies, and he says, I'm gonna do this with my soul. I'm gonna put my entire being, everything I am and everything I have is gonna go into this. And remember, the blessing that you have for your children, and let me say it this way, the influence that you have on your children is the power to shape a life. You say, what does that literally mean? Well, the blessing will shape your identity. This is in your outline. And when I talk about identity is what really gets at this idea of self-worth, because every single child is gonna be defined by something in their life. And really the big struggle, let me say this quickly, and we'll just kind of pull this thought through the sermon. You'll either be defined by performance, right? What you do, right? You'll be defined by achievement, what you accomplish, or you'll be defined by relationship, right? And if you confuse that, you'll struggle. In fact, let me say it to you this way. This is important about identity. You will not thrive in life until you know who you are in Jesus. You will not thrive until you find the freedom that only comes when you realize that you are accepted and loved and chosen, not because of what you do, not because of what you accomplish. You are loved and accepted and chosen because Jesus loved you, chose you, and accepted you. That's how powerful this is, right? This is not abstract, divine favor, material blessing. It's life-shaping. The most important, my dad lived to be 101 and a half. I consider myself to be profoundly blessed because of just the way my dad raised us. That does not mean he was perfect. I could tell you his flaws. He knows them now. The most important thing my dad ever said to me was when I was 19 years old. He said, the only thing that I want for your life is for you to be in the very center of God's will. Of all the things in 101 years of his life and the 65 years that I lived, I buried him on my 65th birthday. In the 65 years, of all the things, if you said, what are the most important, that is the single most important thing he ever said to me. It's life-shaping. It's freeing. It's identity building. The blessing carries divine weight. Now, this is a little bit unique to this story, but it has relevance. In an interesting twist, Jacob's deception is going to be revealed, and when his deception is revealed, and Isaac realizes, hey, I did not do what I set out to do, he doesn't say, hey, I made a mistake. He actually doubles down and he says, he will be blessed indeed. In fact, what Isaac does is he comes to the full realization of the force of what is happening here, and he is literally trembling under the weight of this because he recognizes that this is the will of God. And what you actually have overlooked in this story is that not only is Jacob's life being transformed and shaped by this blessing, but the one that is passing on the blessing, Isaac's life, is being transformed and shaped because he's recognizing that he has power to do something that really doesn't belong to him. It belongs to God. He's a steward of it. He's a vehicle. He's a pass-through. And by the way, that's what you are as parents. Those children are not your children. They're God's children. And you are a vehicle, right? You are a means by which God is transferring the full weight of what he aspires for them in their life. If I could do anything today, if I had to stop this sermon right now, I would stop it and say this. You have no more important responsibility as a parent than to connect your children to the blessing of God in their life and to free them up to live out their identity in Jesus Christ. That's it. And by the way, that's why we do children's ministry. That's why we do student ministry. That's why we try to aim ministry in a way that's the most practical and pointed for you at whatever season and life stage you're at. All right, number 2, let's do the need for blessing. Now, this, and again, way more than material than I could ever cover in a single sermon. And you have to understand the story of Jacob and Esau is a thread and narrative all throughout Scripture. There's enormous theological implications that we can't unpack on this. And I only say this about it. God knows what he's doing. You have to have supreme confidence in the wisdom and the grace and the power of God. And you see how their lives are shaped by what happens here. In Jacob's life, this is verses 18 through 29, he goes to Isaac, he lies. Isaac says, who are you? He says, I'm Esau, your firstborn. He's trying to get past Esau, and he's trying to get his father to remember firstborn. He's pretending and performing because he's insecure about himself. He's riddled with this thought, I cannot and will not be accepted for who I am. I have to be somebody else. That's hard. That's a hard way to live. Some of you feel the weight of that in your life. You're pretending. You're afraid if somebody sees you for who you really are, you'll be rejected, right? And in Esau's case, he cries out bitterly and he says, He said, bless me also. Am I going to be devoid of your blessing? And by the way, let me say this about Esau. It shapes his life in such a profound way because he feels the same inadequacy and the same deficiency that Jacob has felt. Every human being is born with the need to have the blessing of the firstborn. That's really the story here. You all want to be loved as if you're the only born of God. You say, define the blessing. It's to know that God loves you like you're the only child. That's it. That's it, right? Man, by the way, can I say this? Can I say this a little bit humorously? There's truth in this. Some of you think you are the only firstborn and you don't struggle. And others of you think it's never possible. I'm never going to be loved like that no matter what. Even if you are the firstborn, you can't receive it and enjoy it. So I'm going to do this really quick because I want to spend the last time on it. Let me just unpack this really quick in the second point here. Apart from blessing, you'll struggle for identity. And when I talk about identity here, I know I talked about it in that first point a little bit. I want to expand that to include the idea of self-worth. And the point about this is this. Jacob has to pretend to be Esau because he does not believe that his father loves him for being Jacob. The number one sign of lostness in young people is that they struggle with their own self-worth, their own sense of self, and so they begin to pretend to be somebody or something else. It reveals an identity wound in their life. In fact, they spend their entire life pretending, performing, trying to live up, trying to act in a way that they think is going to get them acceptance in life. And they struggle. Both Jacob struggles with this and Esau struggles with this. When you do not believe the real you is good enough, even though, think about it, Jacob already had the birthright. He already had it. He couldn't rest in it, okay? You'll struggle with identity. Secondly, you'll struggle for security. If I could pull every 15-year-old to every 28-year-old in our church and put you in one service and only preach one sermon to you, I would preach on insecurity, anxiety, and this idea of identity and rest. It's where young people struggle. And the reason that you struggle for security, if you look at Esau and Jacob, the reason that you do that is that you don't believe you're good enough. You have to get it from someplace else. And when you don't get what you need, you lose your footing, you lose your security, you lose your foundation, and so your life begins to be filled with doubt, right? You doubt yourself. That's insecurity. You doubt your future. You doubt your abilities. You doubt your calling. You doubt your, right? You doubt everything about your life. That's where insecurity comes from. And in Esau's life, it turns into bitterness. His whole entire life is controlled by this bitterness and anger and jealousy and insecurity. You say, well, man, that's too bad for Esau. That's terrible. Jacob got the blessing and he's perfect. No, Jacob got the blessing and he's driven by even more insecurity. You say, what was Jacob's insecurity? He had to now live to convince himself and everybody else that he was worthy of it, right? He had it, he couldn't enjoy it. And so it sets the trajectory for Jacob's immediate future life. He's driven by fear and insecurity, so he resorts to an operating system that is built on deception and manipulation. We're going to study that over the next several weeks, right? His whole life. He can't stop. And by the way, that's where some of you are. Let me say this lovingly to you. I don't get to counsel you on a personal basis. There's too many of you for me to do that. But this is true. Some of you have built a self-operating system that is built on deception and manipulation. And as long as you're living with deception and manipulation at the core of your life, you're going to be riddled by insecurity. And eventually it's going to show itself up and you're going to keep pretending to be something that you're not and someone that you're not, or you're going to be driven to anger, resentment, and bitterness, and it's going to get flushed out in your life. It's going to happen. It's inevitable, right? You know what the biggest problem with families today, the biggest problem with church today, is that we're filled with people that are unhealthy emotionally, unhealthy in their inner life, and as a result of the fact that they're unhealthy, right, they struggle in every single area of their life. You struggle. Apart from blessing, thirdly, you struggle for rest. Now, because Jacob was building an identity on what he had earned, achieved, accomplished, he could not rest in what he was given. You see, he really hasn't received it yet. He was given it, but he stole it. It's not going to become freeing for him until he receives it by grace. It's critical for parents. And by the way, let me say this. It's critical for grandparents to understand this. There are broken people here who struggle because they do not believe they have the blessing of their parents, and they're carrying a father or a mother wound. I wish I knew this. I wish I knew this 40 years ago. I would have been a better parent. Now, I was a great parent. Let me tell you something. My kids, if they tell you I wasn't a great parent, they're lying to you. I was a great parent, but I could have been a way better parent. And by the way, I'm a horrible grandparent on some levels because I want them to do the hard things and I want to do the easy things. But I still find myself saying, even to my grandkids, and my oldest grandchild would probably say that this is not true, that I sometimes don't do this as I should. Your kids and your grandkids don't get caught up in feeding things that they can't control. Like, don't say to your kids and grandkids, oh, you're the fastest boy I've ever seen. Or you're the prettiest girl that God ever made. Or you're the smartest child. Because here's what's gonna happen. They're gonna find somebody that's faster. They're gonna come across somebody that's smarter. I hate to tell you that, right? They may even, in a unique way, come across somebody that's prettier than them. And if you teach them to build their identity on that, it's gonna crush them, right? You don't build identity on that. You build identity on you are loved and accepted because of Jesus. Let me show you one quick thing, real quick. I want you to get this, real quick. There's a time in Jacob's life, we're gonna come to this in a few weeks, Genesis 32. And God meets him in a profound way. And the whole apex of all this brokenness is gonna come to a head in Jacob's life. And he finds himself literally wrestling with God all night long. And at the end of that, God says to Jacob, let me go. And you know what Jacob says? I will not let you go unless you what? Bless me. He had a moment. It broke into his life. The light bulb came on. I'm not blessed because of what my dad did. Get this. I'm blessed because the ultimate Father has given me something I did not deserve, and he gave it to me knowing exactly who I am. Do you get that? That's the blessing that you need. That's the blessing that you crave for in your life. Number 3, very quickly, the secret to blessing. So I want to give you just a couple thoughts. This should be pretty obvious to you by now, but you have to know this. In fact, I want you to write it down because you have to keep reminding yourself that this is true. You're going to forget it, right? So one, if you really want this blessing, is maybe as difficult as it is to define and wrap your mind around it, I want you to get this. You have to recognize your broken environment. And here it's just a reality moment for you. And by the way, it's encouraging. Can I tell you something? You're not perfect. Your parents weren't perfect. Can I tell you that? Can I say 2 things about your parents? They did the best they knew how to do. They did. And for some of you that have been parents for a long, long time, can I say that to you as an encouragement? You did great. You probably did it better than you would have ever thought you could do, and you probably did better than what your parents did. okay? But you're not perfect parents. And by the way, you were not a perfect child. And by the way, I know that to be true experientially about some of you. Right? Your parents did the best they could with what they had to work with. Here's the good news. God blesses people who are not perfect, and he blesses and uses people who do not come from perfect families, because God's purposes cannot be stopped by human brokenness. The secret to a blessed life is that the gospel is more powerful than all the human brokenness that exists in the whole world. And isn't that encouraging? And by the way, stop right there. Just stop and get this. Some of you know broken people. Some of you have broken people in your life. Some of you have kids that are far from God. Some of you are in what you would think are impossible and hopeless situations. And I'm telling you, the gospel of Jesus Christ is more powerful than all the human brokenness in the world. Secondly, learn the paradox of grace. You got to keep reminding yourself it's not performance, it's not earning, it's not achievement, right? It's grace. Here's Jacob looking deep into his father's eyes, and he knows he's deceived him. His father blesses him not because of what he deserves, but in spite of what he deserves. And on one hand, while this nags at him and it shapes him profoundly, he knows who he is and what he's done. And yet God's still gonna bless him. By the way, that's how grace works. You get what you do not deserve because Jesus took on what you do deserve. Right? You get it. Not because you've earned it, not because you perform, not because you're perfect. You get it because that's how grace works. Now, thirdly, immerse yourself in the gospel. Now, this is where I live. This is where, and I can tell you how this has profoundly shaped my life, the way that I see God's word, the way that I see the world, right? If I could teach you to do anything, and hopefully I am a little bit over time every week as I get to pour into you, I want you to learn how to preach the gospel to yourself. And what I mean by preaching the gospel to yourself is you have to be able to combat the falsehoods, the strongholds, right? The arguments that are being raised up against you, the thoughts that you harbor in your mind that keep saying to you, you're not worthy to be loved, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not smart enough, you're not, by the way, all that's true. All of it's true. But that's not an eliminator, right? The gospel actually works in a way that says those things don't matter, and the gospel is going to shatter those things, because remember, the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. It unleashes a power in your life that will just absolutely wreck you from the inside out. Now, you see it in two places. We're going to talk about curse, and we're going to talk about covering. And then I'm going to be done. Ready? Curse. You get a hint. The hint is in Rebecca. She's actually further along than Isaac is in her understanding. She's further along in her sanctification. She's further along in her faith. And she actually is thinking back to the Genesis 25 experience. And in Genesis 25, she's been told, she's come to this realization that the younger is going to be the servant, or he's going to be the leader of the older, and so the older is going to serve the younger. So she already believes that, right? And so when she says in verse 13, let the curse be upon me, what Jacob is thinking is, I should be cursed. In fact, if I do this, I'm going to be cursed. And Rebecca says, hey, wait a minute. Let me tell you how this really works. I'm willing to take the curse so that you can be blessed. That remind you of anybody? Isn't that what Jesus did? Galatians 3:13. He took the curse so that you could be free from the curse, so that you could live a blessed life. And the only reason any of us can live a blessed life is because Jesus went to the cross, and he just didn't say, I'm gonna take the curse. Jesus went to the cross, and he became the curse for your sin. He took it on completely and paid for your sin entirely so that you could get what you absolutely do not deserve. Listen, the full weight of God's blessing is going to be poured out on you in abundance eternally. Because the firstborn, because the true only begotten son, the true and better older brother gave up the birthright, and he gave up the inheritance so that you would not have to be cursed, you could be blessed. You have to keep reminding yourself, you're blessed because of Jesus, not because of you. That's the principle of curse. But then there's the principle of covering. Jacob appears before his father pretending to be Esau. He's wearing Esau's clothes. He feels like Esau, and he smells like Esau. Jacob is getting what he believed was rightfully Esau's by wearing Esau's clothes. Now, think, what's that pointing to? What's that pointing to? You know how you get the blessing of the firstborn? You get it not because of what you're wearing, not because of you. You get it because you're wearing the clothes of Jesus. You're wearing the righteousness of Jesus. He gave up his garments and he gave them to you so that when you go before the ultimate Father, you don't go dressed as you go dressed as Jesus. And when you look into the Father's eyes, he sees you covered with the perfect righteousness and the perfect record of Jesus Christ. And when he sees that, he frees you, he blesses you, he anoints you. He gives you what your soul is longing for. Because Jesus is the true and greater Jacob, and he's the true and greater Esau. He did not merely pretend or loan his righteousness. He freely and willingly gave up his place as the firstborn son so that you could be clothed in his righteousness and have that righteousness put on you. You get that? Do you know there's a little place in the book of Hebrews? It's one of my favorite chapters. It's hard for me. I've tried to preach it. It's hard for me to unpack it. It's so rich and full. There's a little place in Hebrews 12 where the writer of the book of Hebrews is trying to explain how great salvation is. And he says, you are the church of the firstborn, and your names are written in heaven. Now, why would he say the church of the firstborn? Because you know what the big hole in your heart is? You know what that hunger is down at the bottom of you? You want to be loved as though you are God's only child. And you know what? In heaven, you are the church of the firstborn. You'll be loved as if you are God's only child. So you say, what do you do? Number one, come to Jesus today. Take off your filthy rags, right? And be clothed in the righteousness of Jesus, right? Two, some of you struggle with assurance of salvation. And I've had so many conversations with people, and if I've talked to you about this, I'm not trying to point you out. I'm trying to help you. You struggle with assurance of salvation, not because you haven't been blessed, it's just that you don't deserve you've been blessed. You don't need to get saved again. Now, when I say that very carefully, and if you struggle with it, I'm happy to work through that with you. But the vast majority of you that struggle for assurance in your life, you're not struggling because you're not really saved. You're struggling because you don't believe you deserve it, or you've done something since you made a profession of faith, and that thing that you've done it just weighs on you, and you torment yourself, and you think you're unworthy. You weren't worthy when you got saved. You can't unworthy yourself out of the kingdom of God. It's not gonna happen. Can you receive it by faith, rest in it by the grace of God, and say, I am loved as if I'm God's only child, right? And then finally, you gotta learn to work gospel healing into your broken family. If I could help any of you, it'd be this. Some of you that have come from broken families, don't pass that on to your kids. They don't need it. Don't put that on them, right? Free them from that. And by the way, don't do it out of bitterness or spite to your parents. Be loving and gracious to your parents. They did the best they could, right? And some of the gospel healing may have to go vertical, upward, and some of it may have to go downward generationally, right? We can build healthy generational families by working gospel healing into our life. Learn to raise your kids not based on how they perform. Don't pass on that kind of brokenness. Raise your kids based on the fact that God loves them unconditionally for who they are, and teach them to love Jesus and to know that they're loved by Jesus because of that. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Our heads are bowed, eyes are closed. As we close, we're going to transition into the Lord's Supper. And I know that a sermon like this may cause some of you, there's a lot to process, and some of you have some real emotions. So let me walk through this just while you're in your seat. If you need to be saved, it's really simple. It's not performance. All you have to do is just bow your heads, and in the quietness of where you're sitting, all you have to do is just word a little prayer to God that says, God, I've been trying so hard to get the blessing, and you're offering it to me freely. And today, I take it as a gift. That's it. It's really that simple. And if that's where you are, if that's what you're working through today, would you come see us at the end of the service? Would you see us at the Next Steps table in the lobby, and just let us work through that with you on a personal basis? For some of you lack that assurance. Your prayer today as we prepare for the Lord's Supper should be, I thank you for the gift of salvation. Help me to receive it and rest in it, not because I deserve it, but because you're so gracious, right? And then for others, right, you feel like a grenade has gone off or a nuclear bomb in your family history. Today, have some confidence and boldness in the gospel of Jesus to bring healing into your family dynamic.